He said, I'll be back in a few months. It's all going to be fine. And I remember asking him, like, well, you know, this happened to you in Libya. Do you feel good that this is not going to happen to you in Syria? And he just said, I don't know.
It was only the second time Army Sergeant Sean Cintron met with his close friend and war journalist James Foley for dinner and drinks, a week before Foley was supposed to leave on assignment for Syria. Foley had asked Cintron if he knew anyone that had a helmet and a flak jacket that he could take with him, two items not usually provided to freelance war journalists. Both men parted ways, Foley leaving with a helmet and Cintron hoping that he would see his friend again in a couple of months. However, Foley was never able to return the helmet. Foley disappeared in Syria in 2012 at the height of rebel fighting. No one heard from him. No one knew where he was or what condition he was in. But on August 19, 2014, the New York Times reported that Foley was killed at the hands of ISIS militants. A still of a video showing him on his knees, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, at the hands of an ISIS soldier. But for Cintron, it's not the image he remembers so much, but the grace under pressure and sheer courage Foley represented while in the midst of battle. For Cintron, Foley was the closest thing to a brother in the mountains of Afghanistan.
I really appreciated his friendship throughout that year and just him coming out there. Because he wasn't a reporter, you know, he just became one of the guys.
Cintron first met Foley in 2010 when Cintron was stationed in the Kunar province, a remote area on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Wanting to see more of the daily routines and interactions of a smaller platoon than the military bases he was familiar with, Foley joined Cintron and his airborne infantry unit.
I mean, I guess we were thinking, like, why is he here? You know, what's he going to want to write about or talk about? So I think the initial concern was like, well, are we doing things right? Are we looking good? Are we following procedure? Which we were, but you know, you come under that scrutiny when there's someone filming all that. When he got there, I mean, we welcomed him, and he was just one of the guys. You know, he didn't complain about anything. He was in the same living conditions as us, eating the same food, and he fit in. He met that balance. You know, it was good.
Cintron and Foley immediately hit it off, spending much of their downtime discussing their life goals and their families, especially Foley's brother, who was looking to enter the Army, as well as his other brother and sister. The two also bonded over the literature of Henry David Thoreau, Jack London, and John Krakauer, escaping from the mountains of Afghanistan and into the wilderness of the Alaskan frontier.
And he was on the same page as me, and I didn't have anyone else in the platoon that was into that. So that's what initially sparked our common interests. One of the books was called Into Thin Air by John Krakauer, and it talks about this Everest climb. So I started telling Foley, like, I really want to climb Everest. And he's like, well, pump the brakes a little. I don't know if you're ready for that.
Foley suggested that Cintron start on a smaller scale, and that smaller scale would be the 2,200-mile Appalachian Trail, a trail that stretches from Georgia to Maine, throwing every possible kind of terrain at anyone who chooses to take it on. But Cintron wouldn't be alone. Foley would be right there with him, being pelted with rain, hitchhiking, and climbing mountains that seemed to stretch as far as the eye could see.
At the time, I was just like, yeah, sure, in 2 years when I get out. Yeah, and it wasn't until much later on that I actually looked into doing it. I think it was one of those things that if we make it through this year, then this is what we're going to do. Yeah.
But in order to fulfill each other's promises to hike the trail, it was firefights like this that could have easily cut short the idea of a trail at all. Heavy fire raining down on Cintron's platoon in the middle of the night, with the enemy barely visible besides the flashing of rounds.
If he was fearful, he didn't show it. Like, well, he didn't need to be coddled. He knew exactly what to do when those things happened. You know, he'd get behind cover, get behind one of us, and he wouldn't stop filming, you know. And he was just great at that. But he never mentioned being scared or being fearful. Because a lot of times when we get into a firefight and we're running into our positions, he'd be right behind one of us, just going right there.
Before Foley left the platoon to continue his work, Cintron gave him a parting gift, like any good friend would do, a collection of the opening paragraphs of each chapter in Krakauer's book Into the Wild, something Foley gladly accepted and took to heart. After their parting, Foley moved on to cover the conflict in Libya, where he was later captured in 2011 and interrogated, believed to be a spy. On the other side of the world, Cintron was out of the Army, but knew that Foley would be returning home very soon.
Because he was all about, you know, where are the people suffering? What's going on? What are we not seeing in the rest of the news? So when I heard that he was captured there, I wasn't totally shocked, just because I knew he probably put himself in a situation where it was possible.
And with Foley finally back home, the two friends got the chance to catch up, this time on top of a bar stool instead of on top of a mountain in the middle of Afghanistan.
But he would just talk about how hopeful he was to get home. Just how much he was looking forward to seeing his family. And yeah, he just, even at that time, he was kind of even getting ready for this next big thing.
And that next big thing was Syria.